What's going on, everyone? We all know that the Rudy Gobert and the Donovan Mitchell experiment did not work in Utah. They were never really able to get over the hump. They had some solid teams over the years. They even were the number one seed on several occasions, but just weren't able to put it all together to contend for a championship or even make it to a championship nonetheless. And then Quinn Snyder gets fired, and that was kind of the writing on the wall. I mean, he stepped down, but we all knew that that was kind of the next result. And then ultimately, Rudy Gobert ends up getting traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves for an absolute ridiculous haul. I still don't know why Minnesota gave up all that they gave up for him, but nonetheless, they moved off of him. And then there were a lot of questions like, what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell? Is Donovan Mitchell going to stay? Are they going to rebuild, retool around him? The original reports and talks were that Donovan doesn't necessarily want to force a trade, that he is willing to ride it out, and that he's not putting pressure on the Jazz. And then ultimately, we saw him end up getting traded as well, which many people think that trade wasn't as good and that they could have gotten more for the Knicks if they would have just rode that out. But nonetheless, they got a return for both of these guys, and that is over. Well, Danny Ainge recently talked and addressed the move in general and moving off of this team and just kind of rebuilding, retooling. And this is what he had to say. He said, players that really didn't believe in each other before starting the rebuild, that, he saw just the lack of chemistry. He saw the lack of just team in that locker room. There's lots of talks of Quinn Snyder losing that locker room. Rudy and Mitchell, they didn't really get along ever since the whole vid situation. That seemed to be a big sort of turning point for this Jazz team. And it just looked like they just had a bunch of players that they didn't really like each other. They didn't really get along. Your two stars didn't really seem to mesh well. I mean, there were literally moments where Donovan Mitchell looked like he was doing everything he could not to pass Rudy the ball. You see Rudy complaining about, the lack of touches, stuff like that. It was just a mess that needed to, be done, be moved off of. And Danny got a solid return. I mean, he got a treasure trove of draft picks, got some nice young players, really put this team in a position to be successful now and for the future. So kudos to him. And, when it came to Rudy and that Wolves trade, I still have no idea why the Wolves decided to do that. Like, I really don't. I don't have an answer to that. I just think that it was silly that they gave up as much. Okay, if you wanted to take a shot, you wanted to take a chance on Rudy, okay, cool. We still don't know how that's going to work and if that's even going to be a needle mover at all. I just think that, Towns and Rudy, Towns can shoot the three well. You got that Twin Tower look, but certain matchups, certain moment, I don't know how well that's going to mesh together. I mean, look, the Jazz, that was a deal that you had to take. Even if they weren't thinking about blowing up this team, that kind of deal, you kind of go, all right, Rudy isn't that big of a needle mover. And that's the problem. I think that the Wolves gave up like a star haul for a guy that just isn't a star. He's really great at what he's great at. Blocking shots, getting some rebounds, playing some solid defense, being that cog down low. But even his defensive prowess, there's lots of questions with that. And the lack of being able to create shots. He's a guy that has to create shots for himself. That has to have others create a shot. He can't create shots for himself. And I think that is all things that are going to go into play with Minnesota. That I think Minnesota's going to realize, this wasn't the best deal at all for them. He had issues getting touches as the second option. What's his feeling going to be like when he's like the fourth option? When you have guys like Ant and, D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns who you want them to take more shots than you want Rudy. I think Rudy's going to be, rebounds, putbacks, lobs, stuff like that. Maybe Cat and him can kind of work out that duo to where, Cat's throwing up lobs to Rudy and just, dumping it down low, things like that. The drive and lobs, stuff along those lines. But, you still have a lot of those liabilities of he can't be on the court during crunch time, because then you got the hack Gobert, and, Towns can play the five, but the whole reason you went and got Rudy was to give you that size down low, to make it tough for teams to really score inside the paint, because you got these two twin towers and stuff. And if you can't play, arguably your best defender during the time you need him the most, that becomes a big problem. And we solved that with teams come to playoff times. That was Utah's biggest issue, is that when Rudy was on the court, they just went small. It's like he can't score, and he can't guard out on the perimeter. So we'll just put a smaller guy out there, add some more floor spacing, draw Rudy out of the paint, and then there you go. Now he's neutralized. And if he's in the game late, we'll just foul him. If we're winning, we'll just keep it going. If we're losing, he's a guy that's going to get us back in the game. And that's the problem. And it's not like Cat is a great defender, especially on the perimeter. So it's like you have two guys on the court that can't really defend the perimeter. D'Angelo Russell isn't an A-plus defender. Ant-Man, he has his moments, but he gets lost at times. Who's gonna be your lockdown defense? How are you gonna stop teams outside on the perimeter? Yeah, you might make it tough for teams to get on the inside, but if you're playing teams like the Warriors, how are you gonna compete with the Warriors? You have nobody to guard the perimeter guys, and they don't care about the big man down low. They've always been undersized. Is Cat gonna be able to guard Draymond Green? Is Rudy gonna be able to guard Looney? And stuff like that, or like if Wiseman come back and be that guy that they had hoped he could be, and he can knock down the three ball. That's the problem. It's like, I don't know how well this is going to work, and what the Wolves gave up was a ton, but credit Danny Ainge for that deal. And then the whole Mitchell thing, it makes sense. Move off of Mitchell, get what you can now. The longer you draw it out, how much better of a deal are you going to get? I think he saw the landscape. He saw what there was. The Knicks seemed to be the team that was going to get him. And kudos to the Cavs. I think the Cavs going and getting Mitchell was the best move possible. I think that he's going to be really good for them for the next several years. This is a really good young team that is only going to improve, only going to get better. This team is going to be around for quite some time. I wouldn't be shocked if this team won another championship or two in the next 3 to 5 years. I think Mitchell gives them everything they need as a scoring option. They didn't give up really anything. Those draft picks, they're going to be terrible because this team's going to be really good for the next several years. So those draft picks become irrelevant. The pick swaps are never going to get used. And you gave up Colin Sexton, who you didn't even need or want to sign. And it's just that Colin Sexton has the second worst plus-minus record in history. Only behind Bismack Biyombo or something like that. So Colin Sexton is a big question mark on how good and effective is he when he's on the court. So you didn't need him. He was pointless, and you basically upgraded him and Donovan Mitchell. And then, you lost Lauri Markkanen, which, that he was solid for them, but he's not a necessity. You got Evan Mobley, you got Allen, you got a lot of guys that basically do the same thing he does. So why would you need that? You don't need him. So you moved off of Markkanen, you moved off a guy you didn't want, and you gave a young rotation guy, but he wasn't going to really help you. He was going to be a guy that got relegated to just corner threes and stuff like that. At least on the Jazz, he has a real opportunity to develop into maybe a solid role player. So I don't think the Cavs really gave up anything to get a guy of Donovan Mitchell that gives them exactly what they need. That scoring option, that scoring threat, that guy that can close out games for them, the guy that can show up in big moments and put up points. I think that is huge for the Cavs. And I just think the Jazz, I don't know why. Maybe it was spite, maybe it was ego, maybe it was whatever, but I still think even without RJ Barrett, you could have gotten a better deal from the Knicks. Even the picks alone probably would have been better because Brunson and Mitchell aren't going to be as good as Mitchell on the Cavs. So those picks, worst case scenario, probably. I don't think the Knicks would have still been a playoff team, maybe a play-in team. But with Mitchell and Brunson, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson, I don't think that starting five is good enough to make the playoffs. I think they're terrible defensively. You got two undersized guards. If I was the Jazz, I would have done it just on that. And the Knicks' history of just being terrible, the last 30 plus years. I would have went that route. I would have went hey, I'll take my chances that the Knicks continue to be bad and make bad decisions and that they're not good enough to get that. And I'll get their draft picks. That's what I would have done. The Knicks would have given up at least 3 firsts and 2 pick swaps, something along those lines. That would have happened, no doubt. But anyway, nonetheless, kudos to the Cavs. Kudos to the Wolves. Hopefully it works for the Wolves. I still have a lot of concerns and questions about that. And then for the Jazz, they were able to turn this into a positive, get a jump start on the rebuild, get some real great assets. I think the Jazz are in a good position going forward. I think they got a ton of draft picks that they can use to leverage to go get guys. You only need to hit on like one or two guys, and then you could kind of jumpstart rebuild. Hopefully Sexton turns out to be a solid rotation guy or, player or even maybe a star for you guys. I really do worry about his plus minus. Lauri Markkanen, I mean, he is absolutely killing it right now overseas. He's always been a solid guy in the league. That could have been a big pickup. You got Beasley and Vanderbilt, guys like that. We'll see what the Jazz do with some of these rotation guys. But all in all, I think that this is a great deal for the Utah Jazz. But anyway, as always, this is a conversation, so I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What did you think? Did you think that the Utah got an absolute steal in this and it makes a lot of sense? Do you think they didn't? However you feel, love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.